Well, we're going to start a new series today. We're going to look at the book of Mark. So it's going to take us potentially till Christmas, because we're going to keep interrupting it with different stuff as we go along. If we find that it's not working, then we'll scrap it and we'll do something else. But at the moment, I think it could work. Yeah, I mean, I've heard the author's pretty good, so I think we should be all right with it. So, introducing the book of Mark. I've got some questions here. So, where is it in the Bible? Who wrote it? And when was it written? So, if you're looking for it in a physical book called the Bible, I don't know if anyone has a physical book anymore, but it is the second book of the New Testament, and it is the second of four accounts of Jesus and his life on earth. So most scholars believe it was written by a guy called John Mark. John Mark is referenced in the Bible a few times. He was a co-worker. We see him referenced by Peter in 1 Peter 5:13 and by Paul in Colossians 4:10. A church historian who lived AD 60 to 130, called Papaya, he said that Mark had collected together Peter's accounts of his time with Jesus. So that's why we think that Mark knows what he's talking about, because he was capturing it particularly from Peter. The book ranged when people think it could be written as early as 55 AD, maybe up to 75 AD, most likely in the 60s, and that's between 30 and 40 years after Jesus' death. It's the earliest account that we have that is written down about Jesus' life, and it kind of fell within the time when Nero was emperor, from 54 to 68, when the persecution of Christians went crazy. The things that Nero was doing and blaming Christians at that point was severe. So this gives us a little bit of the backdrop to who Mark is writing to at this point in time. During that period of Nero's persecution, that's when both Peter and Paul are believed to have been executed. Okay, so why was it written? How is it different to the other Gospels, and any kind of key themes that we're picking up in the book of Mark? So the stories of Jesus would have been transferred verbally up until this point, and you've got lots of eyewitnesses from those 30, 40 years after Jesus' death that can tell firsthand the story. But as that generation is beginning to die out, there is a decision of, we actually need to write this down, because we don't want people to be able to change the image of who Jesus is. And that's a temptation that we all have. We always want to shape Jesus according to what is most palatable for us within our cultural sensitivities, within our personal preferences. So there was a need to get this written down. It's a very fast book. It's the shortest of the gospel accounts, but it is relentless with its speed and density. And if you take note, when you're reading the book of Mark, the amount of times it says suddenly, immediately, as soon as, it's like, you're panting by the time you get to the end of it. And Mark, he just focuses on what did Jesus do, and a little bit on what Jesus said, but it's referred to as the action gospel, because it's just, he went from here to here to here to here, did this, and it just comes thick and fast all of the time. So even though it's short, there's so much to be unpacked, because Mark doesn't actually spend much time unpacking what he's writing about. He gives very little commentary on the whole way through, and so you think you're just reading a little bit, and you realize, oh gosh, what does all of this mean? Some of the other gospel writers spend a little bit more time unpacking what they think these different events mean. It's also referred to as the Roman Gospel because it was most likely written by Mark in Rome during this time with a Roman audience in mind. So you get more of the words translated into a certain type of Latin, and there's a few times when it refers to Jewish traditions, it gives a little brackets, and Mark explains what that Jewish tradition is, because the Gentiles of Rome would not necessarily understand all of this. The themes, as we see, Jesus is the action hero and the suffering servant. So he's relentlessly pressing forward with his mission. You also got this incredible emotional expression. It has very strong emotional language coming through. So Mark is writing this to Christians in Rome who face either the temptation of denying Christ or death. And he's constantly bringing them back to, what do you see in Jesus? You see the suffering servant that did everything that he needed to do. And that suffering is not a sign of abandonment. Jesus suffered, but he was not abandoned by God. So why are we wanting to look at Mark right now? Well, we did a long series on 1 Kings. We did a long series on Acts. And we thought, you know what? I'd like to just kind of look at the person of Jesus for a little bit. And before I'd understood about Mark, I thought, well, let's pick the shortest book. And then I discovered it's also the densest. So I want to look at, how did he talk? What did he do when he was on earth? Because I believe God wants to bring us back to an awe and wonder of, we know him. This Jesus, this action hero, this suffering servant, that's the one that I talk to. That's the one who's come and met me. This is my Jesus, but it's everyone's Jesus. So we're not going to commit to jumping into every single verse. We might skip over chunks or spend a lot more time on different things. Today, I only really want to pick out 3 verses in the first chunk of the first chapter. So, are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. Chapter 1, verse 1, the beginning of the good news about Jesus the Messiah, Son of God. Pause. Right. There's so much to unpack in this. So this is one of the very few commentaries that Mark gives. The opening verse, and then you don't know what he thinks most of the rest of the time. But just this verse, there's a few things that stood out to me. The beginning. This is the beginning. So the beginning of the good news talks to me about a couple of things. When I was on my year out, I helped, I was over in serving in a church in New Hampshire in America. And one of the jobs that they got me to do was help concrete a path up to the church building. And the guy was explaining to me that though it will take, 24 to 40 hours to set, and then 28 days to set a full strength, it could keep reacting for years and years and years and decades to come. And that's why I think when I hear the beginning, I gave my life to Jesus in September 1994. The chemicals of what entered into me at that point are still reacting today. That was the beginning of something. But every day I come closer to understanding who this amazing Jesus is, his love, his power, his impact on my life. Tim Keller describes the idea of the gospel has to keep burrowing into the core of your being and push everything else outwards. And every now and again I realize, oh gosh, there's something that's sitting in the center of my being that needs to be pushed outwards. The gospel has to get deeper into me. The reality of who God is and what he's done in my life has not set the tone of every reaction I have yet. So it's got to be pushed outwards. So it's still reacting. It's still going on. I discover something new most days. And that's the invitation that Mark has given us. This is beginning, but it ain't going to end in your lifetime. The other aspect of the beginning of the good news is we're now part of the unfolding of this good news in our generation and our time. 2,000 years on, we are still getting to be part of the impact, the multiplication of the gospel. You are living it, allowing the truth of it to land in you, and you are demonstrating and sharing that with other people. The good news is still reacting through you and beyond you. Jesus himself said, you're going to do greater things than me. Okay, so it's beginning. We're not there yet. The next aspect is good news. Good news. See, Tom Wright, N.T. Wright, writes beautifully on this idea of good news. And he talks about the difference between good news and good advice. Let me just read this extract, and that quote will come up in amongst it. When Paul told people his good news, he didn't mean for them to say, oh, that's interesting. I'll see if it's going to suit me or not. He wasn't inviting them to try a new way of thinking or living that would enable them to live differently or think differently. He was telling them that something had happened which had changed the world, that the world was now a different place, and that he was summoning them to be part of that new, different reality. He was telling them about an event that would cause them to adjust their entire lives in order to come into line with the way things now were. It isn't difficult to see how this worked. When a Roman herald came into a city like Thessalonica, announcing that a new emperor had been enthroned, they didn't mean, here's a sort of imperial experience, and you might like to see if it suits you. They meant Tiberius or Claudius or Nero or whoever is the Lord of the world. You are the lucky recipients of this good news. He demands your loyalty, your allegiance, and of course your taxes. And that's how the Roman good news worked. The herald might have said, if you take my advice, you'll do what you're told. But this piece of advice meant what it meant because of the news about the new imperial fact that had been launched upon the world, whether the world wanted it or not. A lot of the time, we treat the gospel as if it's advice. Try it, give it a go, see if it works for you. It's your truth. That's not what the good news is. There is an event that happened, and because that event, the world is a different place. You can continue to live how you feel, but this is the reality. And there's an invitation to recognize that reality. And so, when we're looking at the good news, we're looking at a declaration of something, an event that took place in history that has reshaped the way that the whole of the universe operates. The Messiah, the Son of God. Now, for us that have grown up this side of the cross, that doesn't seem to be something that would trip us up, combining the Messiah and the Son of God. But back in Jesus' days, Jewish thinking did not combine those two ideas. The idea of an incarnate God, God that had come in human flesh, was actually deeply offensive to the Jewish mindset. God is above the impurity of humanity. God's not going to come and have to wash or use the toilet. That's offensive. That's downgrading the idea of who God is. That was how the mindset would have been. So this statement right at the beginning of the book of Mark is a slap in the face to the mindset of many readers. There was the idea that the Messiah would be anointed one, the Christ. That's what the Greek word for anointed one means. They were to be powerful, divinely appointed, kind of like King David. King David established the kingdom of Israel that defeated all of the enemies. That's what people were thinking when you talk about a Messiah, a conquering, victorious king that reestablished the physical boundaries of the nation of Israel. And you can see later in the book how that mindset affects how Jesus is treated. But the idea of combining the two is completely revolutionary, and actually God putting his money where his mouth is. Because I'm not going to read all of these scriptures, but God echoes throughout all of the Old Testament, I am with you. I am with you. I'll be there for you. I am with you. And in the incarnation of God coming in the form of Jesus, he actually put it in the flesh. He demonstrated it. I am with you in person. I've used a clip at Christmas, the day after tomorrow. So it's one of those kind of futuristic disaster movies where the weather just comes and goes nuts. And so in this particular clip, there's a young guy that's trapped in the middle of New York, has this weather system, is moving across and freezing everything. And he's on the phone to his dad, who is a top scientist that had predicted what was going to happen and can tell the times. And his dad's giving him advice. And so let's see what happens. The Messiah, the Son of God. We see a God that's good for his word. I will come for you. And he did, in the form of Jesus. And that's so absolutely revolutionary. As I said, Mark doesn't spend a lot of time giving his opinion, but this is a staggering opening statement. And the idea of the Son of God being here, it bookends the book of Mark. And it's like Mark is giving us the end scene of the movie. You ever seen a movie like that where you see the closing scene, and then the rest of the movie is, how do we get back to that closing scene? And so you know, as the audience, all right, that's where we're going to get to. And then you spend your time seeing clues that are leading towards that, but a bunch of the characters in the story that just don't get it. So Mark makes that statement at the beginning. We see at Jesus' baptism, God makes the same statement. We see the demons saying that Jesus is the Son of God. We see Jesus' actions. When you look at what those actions meant, they were all declaring that he was the Son of God. But the people that he came to, the children of Israel and the disciples, they just don't get it. The whole way through the book, they don't get it. And even when Peter gets his name right, so in chapter 8, Jesus asks, who do people say I am? And Peter says, you're the Messiah. The problem is, though, when you understand what Jesus meant by he is the Messiah, Jesus means the suffering servant. Peter thinks he's going to be the victorious king that's going to crush the Romans and bring back independence. He thinks, all right, I'll be part of the cabinet. I'll be part of his ruling elite. I've got to stick close to this guy. And what Jesus knows is one day you're going to carry your own cross in your own form. Didn't get Jesus' mission. Didn't get what he was about. And what's surprising is the first person that gets it right in the Bible is a Roman centurion, a Gentile. It says, and when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus saw how he died, he said, surely this man was the Son of God. Now, because we know the end, we can sit there smugly throughout the whole movie, throughout the whole book, saying, oh, you don't get it. ooh, it's so obvious, it's right in front of you. But it's almost like we're watching a frame and we're watching what's going on inside the frame. But what if we discovered, actually, there's someone watching us watching the frame? And suddenly, we're being asked, do you get it? Do you see it? Marcus set us up to think that we've got it, but we're looking at these guys saying, oh, how do you not get it? You see, when we see that the Messiah plus the Son of God was Jesus, what do I see? I see I was so desperately lost that I needed God himself to come and die. That's how lost I was. Nothing other than the God of all creation had to die in my place. Well, I'm not that bad. Yeah, I get a few things wrong. I'm only human. I'm not as bad as Neil. I don't get it. If that's my position, I don't get it. I've not seen that he was the Messiah and the Son of God. I can't climb up to him. In the Bible, we read about the Tower of Babel. The idea is that they wanted to build a tower to get to God. They couldn't get to God. What are we building to try and get ourselves to God? To get that approval? Maybe we're not thinking it's to get God's approval. It's just to get approval. Generally. What am I trying to do to add value to myself? To build up my CV? To build my reputation? If you were to dissect a single day of your life, think how many of your decisions are affected by trying to make yourself worthy. Worthy of who? Worthy of what? Ultimately, we're trying to make ourselves worthy of God. If we are motivated by those things, we don't get it. We're standing or sitting smugly watching others and realizing the reality of this has not touched down in my life yet. It hasn't burrowed to the center of my being. I bring nothing to the table. I had nothing to cause God to desire me. I did nothing to earn it. It was his love for me, completely undeserved. I was not an attractive prospect. I was not beautiful until he loved me, and that is what has changed me so. Is this reality touching down in your life? Why do I feel so unworthy when I receive criticism? Why does it expose me? Why do I have the reaction that I do? This hasn't touched down. This reality hasn't landed yet. Why do I respond so aggressively when I'm slighted or misunderstood? Why am I so paranoid by what other people think? Then I haven't seen that the God of all creation has stepped into my place for me out of his love for me. I'm in the frame and I don't get it. Am I caught up regularly in awe and wonder of who he is and what he's done for me? If I'm not, I'm still in the frame and I don't get it. Now I want to jump down. So Mark goes on to talk about the emergence of John the Baptist, and John the Baptist having this ministry of baptism out in the wilderness, leading to people to repent and get ready for when Jesus comes. Then Jesus comes along and he gets baptized. And as he comes out of the water, it says, just as Jesus was coming up out of the water, he saw heaven being torn open and the Spirit descending on him like a dove. That phrase, heaven being torn open, that really grabbed me when I read it. Such emotive language. It's not, and heaven was unzipped, or heaven was unbuttoned. Heaven was torn. Gives that sense of violence, that sense of permanence. Mark uses this word again later in the Bible, after Jesus dies. Inside the temple, there was a place called the Holy of Holies, and that was the hot spot of God's presence. And only one person could go into that room once a year. It was the high priest, and he went in there to offer blood sacrifice for the sins of Israel. It was so dangerous when he was in there, he had a rope tied around his foot and bells on him, that if you heard the bells stop ringing, he could have done something wrong and died in the Holy of Holies, because he walked into the very presence of God, and they'd have to drag him out by the rope. That curtain that separated the Holy of Holies from the holy place signified God wants to be amongst his people, but his absolute purity and holiness would consume us on contact. So that curtain was his protection to say, you can't come any closer. I want to be with you, but you can't come any closer because your impurity stops that from happening. This is for your own protection. When Jesus died on the cross, that same word for heaven was torn open is used to describe this curtain miraculously tearing from top to bottom. And it would have been about that thick. I mean, this is a proper thick curtain, torn in two, symbolizing the access to God of all creation was opened up for us. No longer is there a separation from his holiness and our failures, because Jesus' sacrifice dealt with the sacrifice forever. And now we can come into the presence of God where we couldn't have ever come in before. That was heaven being torn open for us. And we also see it in the very flesh of Jesus. Jesus' flesh was torn open for us. When he's whipped with the cat and nine tails, which would have been a whip with many different strands of leather on it, with nails and sharp bits of bone put into it. As he's whipped, that would drag the flesh off of his back. His flesh was torn open. He had nails put into his hands and his feet. This was how the way back to the Father was opened up for us, because heaven and the Son of Heaven were torn open for us. Isaiah 53 verse 5 says, he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. Because heaven was torn open, we are put back together with him. In their famous Christmas song, it talks about peace on earth and mercy mild, God and sinners reconciled. We have been reconciled to him because he was the Messiah and he was the Son. So during the baptism, a voice came from heaven. You are my Son, whom I love. With you I am well pleased. That was said over Jesus. But now, it's said over you. Because what he's done, that same phrase is said over you. You are my child, whom I love. With you I am well pleased. Imagine that. Imagine hearing that said over you by the same voice that spoke light into existence. The same voice that tells the oceans where it can flow to. the same voice that calms the storm, that's the same voice that says over you, I love you, and with you I'm well pleased. God, I need you to make that real. I can't grab it. I want it. I want the reality of that. Because he was torn, God now looks on me and says this over me. Because when he looks at me, he doesn't see my impurity. He sees Christ's righteousness that has been put upon me. In 2 Corinthians 5:21, God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. Took Jesus, never done anything wrong. He took what was on me, put it on him, and took that robe of righteousness, of being right with God, and placed it on me. Philippians 3:9, and being found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, not by anything I could do, but that which is through faith in Christ, the righteousness that comes from God on the basis of faith. All I have to do is accept, you've done everything for me. I've brought nothing to the table. You've done everything. I get to wear his righteousness. 2 Corinthians 3:18, we're being transformed into his image with ever-increasing glory. I'm looking more and more like him. That's what he's doing in me, making me more into him. He's seeing more of Jesus when he looks at me. Galatians 3:27, for all who were baptized into Christ have clothed yourself with Christ. I look like him now. I'm clothed in him. Everything that he did right has covered up all the things that I did wrong. Am I living in this reality? When I walk into any room, I come pre-approved by God. Do I live as if that's true? He declares his love over me before I've done anything. I'm not living to gain his approval. I'm living from his approval. I don't live and die based on my performance, so I need not get too proud with the few things I get right and not too crushed with the many things I get wrong. It's not based on my performance. Does this lift your spirit? Does it say, yes, yes, yes? He says this over me. The gospel's still reacting, still burrowing down into the core and displacing all of the lies that I've operated on up until this point. So let's not look smugly at the disciples and the children of Israel. Let's ask God to allow the wonder of this truth to capture our hearts and our minds. So my question for you, do you want to be caught up in that awe and wonder? That this was the Messiah, the Son of God. That this truth of what he went through for you, it has meant that the God of all creation calls you by name and says, I love you. I'm pleased with you. Just take a few seconds, just close your eyes and allow God to highlight what he wants you to be thinking about at this point. Just ask him in the quietness of your heart, God, what are you saying to me?